I want to have a chat to you guys about how my week went. So, I had a really productive week, and something has been on my mind, specifically what it is that made this week so productive, because my productivity is like a sine wave. It's something that was incredibly nerdy. My productivity is very variable. It's very up and down. It just sort of one week it'll be fantastic. I'll get a lot of stuff done. I'll be very motivated. I will love my work. And then the next week it can be a complete train wreck where I just literally do barely any work and play Minecraft all day and just now, as someone who goes through phases like that quite often and then usually writes them off to just, oh, well, I'm working from home, or I've had a really rough week, or I'm not feeling too well, or any number of other excuses. This week, where I've just been on a roll making these videos, this is like my fourth video this week, and I think the third one in a row. I sat down and I thought about why exactly this week went so well for me and what I did differently. And really the thing that I owe it all to is what I like to call the concept of just do it. There are always going to be excuses that you can come up with. Always. I, for one, love coming up with excuses for why I don't want to do this or that. I feel like I'm getting better at it, but it's still something that has been a part of my life. It's very easy to fall into this trap of just constantly coming up with excuses for why you're not realizing your dream or your goals, or why you're not working on a project or implementing a feature or creating a video that you've always wanted to. Maybe you're not ready yet. Maybe you just feel like if you did a little bit more research or if you were a little bit smarter, then you'll be able to do it better. And so because of that, you're not doing it yet. Maybe you realize that it's just too much work and it's hard for you to break it down into small manageable chunks and you end up not doing anything. Well, guess what? Done is better than perfect. This is something that a lot of people have said in the past, but it is so true. For years with this channel that I've had just based around programming, I've constantly had these certain expectations that I have to meet. I can't write this code. I can't release this feature in this current state. People are going to want to expect it to be the perfect implementation, the fastest implementation, the most efficient implementation. I hate all of that, and I'm completely against all of that. I think this whole done is better than perfect mentality is so important for software engineering. You're not going to write the perfect code as soon as you dive in and start writing your code. It's just not going to work that way. You're going to have to iterate over what you've done. Just sit down and start writing slow, terrible code. If that's all you know how to do right now, do it. If you continually just put off writing any code for a specific system because you don't know how to write that system, you're not going to get anywhere. When I first started programming, and I still think one of the reasons why I learned the initial kind of basics of game programming and programming in general so quickly was because I was like 16, 17 years old. I had just started programming. I had no idea how anything worked in terms of like how game systems were implemented, but I didn't care. I was sitting in English class, I had my laptop, I had Java, and I was just like, you know what? I'm going to try and make this kind of game, or I'm going to try and implement this feature. And using the very small amount of experience and knowledge that I'd had, I sat down and I worked out how to do it using that subset of skills. And that's something that I feel is really lost nowadays. You see all these people on the internet putting up amazing looking, demos and like amazing like feeling games or like incredible renders of like their own art or whatever. And you just think, wow, like I can't compete with that. I have to, they went to college for like 3 years, or they've worked for 5 years in the games industry. I can't do that right now. Wrong. Just do it, man. Stop comparing yourself to other people. Stop caring what other people think of you. Just do it. Because guess what? If you can just make this thing that you want to make and it's on the screen and it's there, you've already beaten all other expectations that you would never finish it or that you can't do it because you've done it. Sure, it might not run in 1 millisecond. Maybe it runs at 10 milliseconds, but guess what? That's still fine. And the thing is, now that you've implemented, now that you've got something on the screen, you can iterate over that. You can go back and you can work out how to do it faster, but you've done it. You can show people and you can it's amazing. So anyway, what I did this week was I didn't let myself kind of make excuses for, I should probably maybe think about this video a little bit more before I do it. I should probably plan it a little bit more. I should probably, I've got these other things that I have to do. I can't make this video. No, I just said, you know what, stop it. You're gonna sit down, you're gonna hit record on the camera, and you're just going to make this video. And the amazing thing is, once you start doing it, it all just comes to you. Trust me, you guys have no idea how often I put off making videos. If every time I was like, oh man, I want to make a video. If I actually made a video every time I had a feeling of making a video before I started doubting myself for doing all of that stuff, you guys would probably be getting like 2 videos a day, honestly. And that's a huge thing for me that I've been working on and that I really want to improve going forward. This whole aspect of, if you kind of just actually do the work instead of thinking that you're not good enough or that you need to do X, Y, Z before you actually get up to the ability to do a certain task, that's going to go a long way. Anyway, what's up guys? My name is the Cherno. Welcome back to another one of these like Hazel devlog / random vlog. Man, this channel is really going downhill. I thought about these videos as a whole and thought that it would be cool for these weekly vlogs to actually have some kind of theme or some kind of thought, or maybe even like revolve around a question from you guys, something like that we could discuss instead of just, showing you guys what I've done with Hazel throughout the week, because sometimes there's not much to show, and sometimes I think it would be really cool to connect a little bit closer with the community and find out what you guys are up to as well. But to be honest, I have had a pretty productive week over the past couple days. I have been working on implementing like mouse picking into Hazel so that we can basically just click on different objects in our scene. I'll show you guys what that looks like in a minute. I honestly have been really motivated this week, which I think is good, and part of the reason I think is that, Hazel's finally getting to the point where instead of just laying foundational kind of boring stuff, I'm actually able to potentially start using it very soon to actually make stuff. And it's kind of, well, basically it's just gotten more fun. And then on the flip side, with the actual game engine series and all of that stuff, we're getting to the point where people have started making a lot of content for Hazel, which is really cool. And now I'm working on this little game for Hazel as well as part of the game engine series. There's just so much fun stuff going around. Very exciting times. But anyway, without further ado, let's jump in and take a look at what I've done in Hazel this week. So inside our test scene, and we kind of talked about this last time a little bit with the materials and all of the other stuff that I added to kind of create some sort of workflow between Blender or any 3D modeling program really and Hazel. This current scene, as I showed you guys, we have kind of two things that make up this scene. We have this kind of test entity, and there's no real entity component system in Hazel yet. That's one of the biggest next steps that I'm actually going to take. But at the moment, we have this gun entity, which is this animated mesh that we have here. It's just a very basic test, and we're just testing animation, as well as being able to have multiple quote-unquote entities in the scene. But then this test entity mesh is the actual scene, what you see here. And as you can see, it's made up of various sub-meshes. And I think I accidentally exported the sunlight from Blender, which is why we have sun here as well. But we have floor, cube, cone, sphere, wall. That's what you see here being rendered as part of our test scene. Now, each of these are in fact separate meshes. This is the scene. This is like the mesh hierarchy. And they do have various like transforms and all of that stuff. They are basically independent objects and meshes. They're just grouped into one larger mesh. And so over the past week, or really over the past couple days, what I've done is I've made it so that you can actually click and select various sub-meshes that make up your scene, and then manipulate them using these gizmos. So in other words, I can click on the sphere and then I can move it somewhere else. Or I can click on the cone and move it. I can scale it, I can basically start to create some kind of scene if I really wanted to, based off of just this mesh that I've kind of imported here. And there's even snapping if you hold control, which is kind of useful. This is really like early days, and I expect to really iterate over this probably quite a bit. But it's cool to see basically the beginning of these building blocks, I guess, inside Hazel Dev. If I move over here, I can move the cube somewhere else, maybe scale it up, can even rotate it. So the next real step would be to import multiple assets, because at the moment we obviously just have the one kind of test scene, and you can load anything you want by just clicking here, and then, it'll open an open file dialog and you can load any FBX in, but you can only still see one, and of course you can't really compose your scene from multiple meshes and multiple entities. So that's kind of the biggest next step, I guess, in all of this. And of course, if you deselect everything, it actually selects the entity. So you can see I can like scale it up and down and like rotate it and all of that. And then I can obviously adjust everything from within that kind of entity as well. So we kind of have like an entity transform, and then obviously like some kind of local transform for each of these meshes within that. Other things I still need to work on are the visuals for when you select something. So in other words, the kind of visual feedback you get for what's currently selected at the moment is just simply its bounding box, which is just a very temporary thing because we had bounding boxes anyway. But we're going to probably likely want some kind of outline shader, maybe something that will just create like an outline effect over the currently selected object. A lot of 3D programs do that. Blender does that, Unity does that. We'll probably go with something like that. We can also like do a quick like little wireframe pulse when you first select an object just for visual effect. That might be nice. A few different ideas here and there, of course. But right now you get the bounding box. And speaking of bounding boxes, if you're interested in how this is implemented, basically we just cast a ray from the mouse into 3D space. And then what we do is we basically just query all of the objects in the scene for their bounding box. So in other words, all of these submeshes have a bounding box that's calculated when you actually import the mesh. We then check to see if the ray collides with any of these bounding boxes. And if it does collide with the bounding box for, let's just say this sphere, for example, we pick the closest collision as well. So in other words, there's this floor behind the sphere, but since the ray hits the sphere first, if I click on the sphere, we're inside the sphere's bounding box. So now we just retrieve all of the triangles that make up the sphere and we test those with the ray. And that gives you very, very precise intersections. So in other words, you can see if I click literally like 1 pixel off here, it's going to select the floor. But if I click here, it's going to select the sphere. So it's extremely precise. You can see it. You can see that happening right here, which is really nice. Now, most of this was actually written in the live streams that I did yesterday. I actually ended up doing 2 live streams, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, because I really wanted to get this finished. So you guys can definitely check that out if you have access to that through Patreon. But there definitely are still some optimizations that can be done. One of which is, for example, at the moment, we just get the bounding box of every single submesh, but it will definitely help to have a bounding box for the entire entity that we can check first. Because if we have like a more realistic scene made up of like a lot of different entities in the scene, then checking every single submesh in the entire scene is going to be very slow. So instead of that, we can just check the entity bounding box first, kind of early out if the ray doesn't hit that. And then if it does hit the entity's bounding box, check out the submesh bounding box. And if it does hit a submesh, then check out the triangles. But again, obviously, if you end up having like a very, very, very detailed model with like 1 million triangles, then that is going to be quite slow. So you could just potentially use like a lower LOD of that or something like that. There's a few different things you can do, but that is the basic idea. Alright, so I hope you guys enjoyed that little look into Hazel Dev. Don't forget that if you help support the channel and Hazel and all that stuff on patreon.com/Cherno, you will get access to not only the live streams that show me working on this stuff, you'll also get access to all of the source code for what you see here, which is Hazel Dev. Thank you so much for your support. Let me know what you guys thought of this video. Love you all. I will see you next time. Goodbye.